Hi, Sunday, December 29th, 2024. As I mentioned, there was an airplane crash at Muan International Airport that's quite near to my city, Gwangju. And there are about 179 people are assumed to died there. Most of them are Koreans. Only like eight Thais from Thailand. They they departed from Thailand and tried to land at the airport, but at the last minute they hit the flag of ducts in the midair, and it just uh, malfunctioned the one of the engines, and they circled the airport and tried to land, but the landing gear was down. I mean, landing gear did not fully expanded, and so they tried to land with a body landing, but somehow they crashed into while on the tarmac they crashed onto the wall of the airport, and people died. That's sad. Uh, but I'm gonna read this article to continue to learn English. We need to live our life to the fullest because we never know when we would die or not. This article is from ABC News from Australia. The title is Australian dollar could be heading to a 20-year low on risks of China, Trump, and slow growth by Chief Business Correspondent Ian Veranda, right? Currency. Tuesday, December 24th. Australian dollar is one of the world's most actively traded and volatile currencies. Things stock. I stock fodder. You wouldn't be an economics forecaster for quids, right? Quids, money, dollars, right? Quid, qian in Chinese, quid. Well, maybe you would, given the money they make, never even blinking about their frequent and sudden about turns, about faces, about turns, blinking. A couple of months back, when the Australian dollar burst through 69 US cents, there was no shortage of highly paid currency traders and economists predicting a quick flotation with 70 US cents before heading onwards and upwards, right? Flotation, predicting. So it's above 70 US cents. Wow. So their currency is very strong at the time, right? Increasing. All that's suddenly changed. Now the currency is down in the low of 60 US cents, and the calls are that it will continue to weaken. Wow, that's bad. So if your children are in the States learning in the educational institute, you have to wire the money, and that means you have to wire more money. And the Americans can instead buy more of Australian products because they can, uh, give more Australian dollars to the seller. But we are also sliding against other major currencies like the pound and the euro as a raft of negatives pile up against us, right? A raft of negatives, a raft of tree logs that are floating down the streams. A raft of negatives pile up against us. A weak Chinese economy, American threaten to impose punishing trade tariffs, a poor medium to long term outlook for our key exports, and a sluggish economy are likely to keep the Australian dollar under pressure through 2025, threatening to send it into the 50 US cents. Wow. The outlook for the Australian dollar is tied to the uh, fortunes of our key exports, right? That's bad. If that does transpire, it will be the weakest we've seen the Aussie battler in more than 20 years, back to April 2003 to be precise. That was when the dot com boom had gone belly up, and Australia was seen as a relic from a bygone era, doing nothing more than digging up dirt and shipping it offshore. Nothing more than digging up dirt and shipping it offshore. Right. They just have nothing to sell overseas. The upside of heading down, the Australian dollar is one of the world's most actively traded currencies. It's also one of the most volatile. We may not be among the world's biggest economies, but we are a major trading nation, exporting vast amounts of agricultural produce, minerals, and energy. And then there's our connection to China, because it dominates our trade to such a huge extent. It has made the Australian dollar a proxy for anyone wanting to speculate on the health of China's economy. Wow. So it has a strongest tie with China's economy. Combine all those factors and you end up with a currency that endures some pretty wild swings. Multiple rounds of financial stimulus have failed to assure investors that China's economy is turning a corner, right? Changing its directions from going south to going maybe west, east, and finally north. In the early part of the millennium, the dollar plunged before 50 US cents. By the time the resources boom was in full swing a decade later, it was trading at 1.10 US dollars. There's no bad thing for the currency essentially acts as a shock absorber. That's no bad thing, for the currency essentially acts as a shock absorber. During periods of global crises, such as the global financial crisis and the pandemic, it quickly takes a massive hit, helping insulate the domestic economy from whatever is happening elsewhere in the world. That then eases pressure on the Reserve Bank of Australia (RBA) and the federal government to take emergency action, and delivers some breathing space. Right? Delivers some breathing space. But expanded periods at the extremes can be damaging. A weak currency fires up inflation because imports become more expensive. An expensive currency can really damage domestic industry, as we discovered during the resources boom when the manufacturing was squeezed out and firms either shut down or moved offshore. Squeezed out, right? Expensive currency. So that's expensive, right? From pride to prejudice. As we all know, perhaps a little painfully, the Reserve Bank has a mandate to maintain price stability. So both weak currency and expensive currency are problematic, right? A weak currency fires up inflation because imports become more expensive. An expensive currency can really damage domestic industry, as we discovered during the resources boom when manufacturing was squeezed out and firms either shut down or moved offshore. From pride to prejudice. Pride and Prejudice is the novel name. From Pride to Prejudice by Dostoevsky. As we all know, perhaps a little painfully, the Reserve Bank has a mandate to maintain price stability. And for more than 30 years, Like every other central bank around the world, it's had a steely gaze on consumer prices and iron-fisted attitude in controlling them via interest rates. That wasn't always the case. In the post-era war era, when the RBA was hived off from the Commonwealth Bank in 1959, price stability was interpreted as keeping the Australian dollar steady. Good expression, hived off. Beehive, right? You need to expand your beehive, bee colonies. To do so, you make another new hive and export some of the bees onto the new hive. So it is called hive off. RBA dodged a bullet. New Zealand's economy has slipped into one of the developed world's worst recent recessions, but it seems like the RBA is avoiding the same mistakes. In many cases, the currency was kept artificially high just to maintain a sense of national pride. Uh, how times have changed. Ever since the turn of the century, almost every developed nation has battled to undercut the value of its own currency to gain a trading advantage of its competitors. That's because a weak currency makes your exports cheaper and boosts your income from the goods and services you sell overseas. And it protects your domestic businesses as consumers switch away from overpriced imported goods. For more than 20 years, America routinely has declared China a currency cheat, being critical of Japan and admonished Europe over exchange rate manipulation, and all with a straight face, as it has engaged in one of the biggest money printing exercises in history, which has been designed in part to weaken the greenback. Yeah, Japan. Weaken the greenback with all with a straight face, as it has engaged in one of the biggest money printing exercises in history, which has been designed in part to weaken the greenback. At various times, we've been caught in the middle of those currency wars. The Aussie dollar may be a heavily traded currency, but our economy is nowhere near the size of America, China, Japan, or Europe, giving us little firepower to take on the others in the art of manipulation. Understood, right? Your reservoir, the water level in your reservoir is quite low. What moves the Aussie battler? There are two main forces that move most currencies, ours included. One is the level of interest rates relative to other markets, and the other is the amount of capital flowing either into or out of the country through trade or direct investment. As a stable democracy with a strong legal framework, Australia is considered a safe place to stick your cash. To stick your cash, right? Stick your cash in the crevices. Stick your cash in the bosom of a lady. Stick your cash in the bosom between in the breast of the nude dancing pole dancer. The rise and fall and rise again of Bitcoin. Donald Trump was once a crypto skeptic. Now his re-election has sent the volatile price of Bitcoin sky high. So when Australian interest rates look like rising, investors globally rush to take advantage and buy up Australian securities and interest-bearing investments. Interest-bearing investments. To do that, they have to convert their home currencies into Australian dollars, thereby pushing their value higher. Trade and investment flows also have a big impact on, and that's what we saw during the resources boom. Huge amounts of cash flowed in to finance the construction of new mines, while existing mines earned squillions as commodity prices soared. Squillions, that's new term, right? Billions, billions, squillions. Right now, unfortunately, probably it's Australian word, right? Define. Let's go to define squillion. A squillion is an informal term for a very large number of or amount, especially a large amount of money. He made squillions from selling his business. I get squillions of emails every day, and it costs us squillions. Squillion is often used humorously, so it's not restricted to Kiwis. In British English, right? British English. The US dollar is incredibly strong, with market interest rates still slightly higher than ours, even after the most recent cuts. Right now, unfortunately, all the tides are moving against us. Commodity prices are also under pressure, including iron ore and energy, while the new critical minerals are suffering from oversupply, right? Are under pressure. Where to now for the Aussie dollar? There's an argument that our currency has been oversold that might be legitimate in the short term, but looking at a longer time frame, it's likely we will remain under pressure. Partly it's because our over-reliance on one major economy has come back to bite us. China's China's incredible growth was fueled by a combination of government-directed investment in infrastructure and manufacturing exports, and by taking advantage of trade law loopholes that delivered it developing nation status. More economic business. Let me read this one more time. China's incredible growth was fueled by a combination of government-directed investment in infrastructure and manufacturing exports, and by taking advantage of trade law loopholes that delivered it developing nation status. More economic and business analysis. A weak Chinese economy, American threatens to impose trade tariffs, a poor export outlook, and sluggish economy are likely to keep the Australian dollar under pressure in 2025. The most remarkable transformation in history has been accompanied by serious growing pains which have collided with structural and demographic problems that have created headaches for Beijing. A series of investment bubbles, burgeoning debt levels, and aging and shrinking population have coalesced into an economy spiraling into its fourth year of problems as deflation kills investment and strangles consumption, right? Deflation. They have less money. Money does not circulate. Add a potential trade war into the equation as the US isolates itself behind tariff walls and the heightened prospect of global conflict on multiple fronts, and you have formula for what promises to be most unprecedented volatility. And that's another good cliche. You have formula, right, for disaster, right? You have a formula for what promises to be almost unprecedented volatility. Here, you have a formula for disaster. That's the main usual 80% usage of formula. You have formula for what promises to be almost unprecedented volatility. Okay, so this article is rather short, but it just conveys the message well. The Australian dollars are weakened every day. That means $1 will give more Australian dollars so that outside investors can buy up more securities and interest-bearing instruments in Australia. But since the Australian dollars are weakened, that means the export will be okay, but the import will be stopped, and it will create a huge shit of problems. And China, it's almost basically strongly tied to Chinese economy, but China is tanking after the 4 years in straight because of Trump and the Biden politics. Last time I visited China was 2 months ago, and I could see that economies were not good. People seem to be poorer than before, and since I'm Korean, it was good, right? I had to pay more Korean won to buy yuan, but overall the prices in China were very low. Let's learn more about EM Veranda, right? By click on the EM Veranda. EM Veranda is the ABC's chief business correspondent, a journalist for more than 40 years. Veranda began working in print in 1981 as assistant economist for Rural Press and later freelanced for the Bulletin before moving to AAP Reuters. He spent 25 years at the Sydney Morning Herald in a variety of roles, including senior writer, business editor, and senior business commentator. He joined Business Spectator and the Eureka Report in 2012, and since 2005 also worked at Sydney radio station 2UE, providing early morning business commentary. He joined the ABC as business editor in 2014. Hey, young Veranda, you look nice and young for your age. Since you joined the Rural Press in 1989, I assume that you are about 10 years older than me, which means that you are like a 56, 65 years old, or 60, right? But we could be friends, and I visited Australia before, Brisbane, Gold Coast, Newcastle, Canberra, Sydney, and Melbourne, right? And it was fun. I drove on the road. If you invite me over, hey, I cannot refuse. I would go and to Sydney again and meet you up. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a wonderful Sunday.